3 minutes. Mr. Strangio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. My name is Chase Strangio. I am testifying in opposition to the bill on behalf of the ACLU and the ACLU of Tennessee. I am Deputy Director for Transgender Justice at the ACLU. I have been an attorney at the ACLU for 10 years. I am currently lead counsel in the ACLU's challenge to Arkansas's ban on care that looks a lot like this one, as well as in ACLU's challenge to Texas's child abuse directives that look similar to the amendments that have just been passed by this committee. So I speak to you today as someone who is actively litigating these issues about the constitutional implications, as well as the cost to the state of Tennessee and Tennessee taxpayers. Courts across the country have recognized that bills like this impermissibly violate the equal protection and due process rights of adolescents, doctors, and their parents. The Northern District of Alabama, the Eighth Circuit, and the Supreme Court of Texas have all enjoined measures like this one because they have found that they represent government overreach and intrude upon the fundamental rights of parents to govern the medical decision-making of their minor children, as well as the equal protection rights of transgender adolescents and the doctors who care for them. I just got out of a 2-week trial in Arkansas in which many of the legislative findings that are in this bill were tested, in which they were found to be categorically untrue. And just by way of a few examples, it is not true that this medical care is experimental, not in the scientific nor in the colloquial sense. There are decades of studies testing the efficacy and safety of this treatment. It is also not true, as the amendment states, that care has been banned in Finland, Sweden, or the United Kingdom. And to the contrary, in the United Kingdom, care has been expanded to regional centers. And Dr. Cass, who is the author of the Cass report, who is often cited in support of legislation like this, has made clear that her report has been misrepresented. And rather than being inconsistent with medical standards, this medical treatment is provided pursuant to medical standards that are supported, as the Representative Mitchell said, by every major medical association in the United States. Because this law infringes the fundamental rights of parents and discriminates based on sex and transgender status, it triggers strict scrutiny, or at least heightened scrutiny, which means it will be the government's burden to defend it in court. And Tennessee, like Alabama, like Texas, like Arkansas, will not be able to do so. Already in Arkansas, costs and fees alone for plaintiffs have been over $3 million. The state of Alabama has not yet reached trial and has spent $1.7 million defending their bill, to say nothing of the cost they will likely owe to plaintiffs due to attorneys' fees. And because I only have a short amount of time, I want to quickly address the issue of the child abuse. The sponsor of the bill indicated that there are no criminal penalties attached, but abuse and neglect proceedings are civil. I cannot think of a greater intrusion into the fundamental rights of parents than the prospect of losing custody of one's child.
Gentlemen, your time is up, but I'll give you 30 more seconds. Please, please, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do appreciate it. And I just want to say, and I know that we'll be hearing from Ms. Cole later, and I've heard her speak before. I don't believe she has ever said that her parents are to blame. And what is at risk of happening is that parents who are following the medical advice of doctors are at risk of losing their children. Multiple people were supposed to come here today to testify, but they were too afraid. I am concerned about what this means for families in Tennessee and for the cost that this will inevitably bestow on taxpayers. And
Chairman Leatherwood, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you. Given your experience with similar legislation in other states, I wonder, in your opinion, what might remedy the problems with this legislation?
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you. So just two parts. I will say that as someone who is transgender myself, who has benefited from this care, whose life has been saved by this care, I oppose this bill in its entirety. I will say what concerns me perhaps most in this moment is the amendment about the child abuse. I am worried that it sets a slippery slope. At what point is some other medical decision that parents make? Every time I go to the pediatrician, I ask a lot of questions about my 10-year-old, and there aren't always answers. There isn't always clarity about what something might look like in 5 years, in 7 years. We don't know a lot in medicine. And so what we're saying here is that the state might come in and punish a parent who is trying to do right by their child, a parent who loves their child, as I know all of us as parents do. And when our children are suffering, it is excruciating. I think that we can agree on that. And the last thing that we need to be doing is punishing parents for trying to help their children. And it is not through the criminal law that the most egregious forms of punishment sometimes happen to parents, because abuse and neglect proceedings are civil in nature. So I think that that is something that this committee should look very seriously at, whether right now or whether when the committee takes it up as the full committee. I think this is something that we have never seen, quite frankly, in the way in which the government regulates medicine, to categorically deem something as potential child abuse. And I will say, for those of you who are lawyers, the Supreme Court of Texas, the Eighth Circuit, these are not places where so-called transgender ideology has taken hold. Governor Hutchison in Arkansas vetoed a similar piece of legislation because he said this represents vast government overreach. And I can't think, I hear a lot about parents' rights. What about the rights of parents who are trying to help their suffering children? And even if we disagree about ultimately the efficacy or the safety of this care, or whether it's good or bad to be transgender, I happen to think it's a normal variation of human existence. But even if we disagree about that, these are parents whose kids are hurting.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much. Last individual on our list is Chloe Cole. Chloe, if you could please step up. Once again, as we've mentioned as well, you've got 3 minutes, but if any questions come from the committee members, we can certainly entertain a few minutes longer. So, Ms. Cole, if you could please tell us who you are and your expertise on this particular issue. You're recognized.